I think I start off each one of these videos lately like this. It has been 6 weeks this time, 6 long weeks since the last The Batman discussion series video. So welcome back, family. Welcome back to a brand new episode in the discussion series. This is the longest time I think it's been in between episodes, so we need to get right back into it. If you're brand new here and you don't know what this series is about, well, it's kind of in the name. We discuss, we theorize, we speculate all about Matt Reeves' Batverse. You guys send questions in, ideas, theories. I ramble for a long time about it, and then the cycle just continues. So I hope you enjoy your stay here. Thank you so much, by the way, for making the last 2 videos pop like really good. I think they hit like well over 30k views. So let's see if we can pull that off once again in this episode. Hit that like button if you go on to enjoy this. Consider subscribing if you're brand new, and let's just get right into it. So the first comment here, I believe, is going off the back of last video. This is from Slade the Deathstroke saying, I think the Court of Owls are better utilized for the DCU Batman than Reeves's The Batman world. One of the reasons are the Bat family. In the Court of Owls story, Batman was not alone when dealing with the court. He has the Bat family. It would be cool to see a live action movie of Batman and the Bat family face against the Court of Owls. If there's a Nightwing movie, you can sprinkle some hints of the Court of Owls. Dick Grayson was meant to be a Talon for the court before his parents died and Bruce took him in. So yeah, this is kind of going into DCU Batman territory, but I do completely agree. And before anyone says it, because I know so many of you would absolutely love to see the Court of Owls in Matt Reeves' Batverse. Trust me, I get it. The tone, the detective-driven noir feeling of it all, stumbling across a deeper corruption. But without repeating so much of what I said in the previous discussion series episode as to why I just think that could be repeating the theme of corruption again, even though it is quite different from what Riddler exposed and unmasked with the corruption of Gotham City, I do still ultimately somewhat agree with Slade the Deathstroke here by saying if we would see that, considering we've only got like 2 more movies in the Batman trilogy, I'd rather that effort be put somewhere else with another villain, whether that be Scarecrow, Bane, Clayface, Mr. Freeze, you name it, and maybe considering in the DCU's Batman world, where he's likely been Batman at least around 10 years or more, just going by the fact that he's already got a Bat family. It would be pretty cool considering the DCU is an 8 to 10 year plan if they somewhere sprinkled down the line that could be a story that they're willing to explore, especially as the Court of Owls is really effective in that story because this is a Bruce Wayne who feels like he knows everything about Gotham, like he knows it like he knows his own freaking house. And yet there is still something that has eluded him this whole time, despite his experience as the Dark Knight of Gotham. To do that, you know, by the second movie or even the third in the Batman trilogy, I think they could adapt it because, as I always say, adaptations aren't copy and paste, so Reeves could still find a really cool way of doing it. But yeah, I do agree that DCU Batman would probably blend pretty well with the Court of Owls if that's a story they're willing to visit in a future Batman story, of which you'd have to think, you know, The Brave and the Bold isn't the only Batman story you're going to get in the span of the DCU. What do you think about that? With all said and done, do you still believe and are absolutely adamant that the Court of Owls should be put into one of the 2 remaining movies in the Batman trilogy? Don't get me wrong, if the Batman was like a set of movies, whereas like 6 movies, you know, Hunger Games level, Harry Potter level, I'd be totally game for that. But since it's not, I kind of rather Matt Reeves, and this is in my intuition as well, I think he would opt to go for different Rogues Gallery villains for the final installments. But one thing that I think would be cool is if there's Easter eggs laid throughout the next 2 movies. So where do we get, I don't know, the ventriloquist in the Batman 2, and then Mr. Freeze in the Batman Part 3. But every now and again, you see a little owl or something like that. I think that would send fan theories into overdrive, so maybe they shouldn't do that, because that would mean if they do that in the Batman Part 2, people would be like, well, you see this means they're going to be in the Batman Part 3. But yeah, if they put little Easter eggs, I'd appreciate that, because then it's the headcanon of Robert Pattinson's Batman's future. And there's even this comment here from Jadlam96 saying, the Court of Owls would be best utilized when Batman has matured and developed to the point of, I know Gotham like the back of my hand. Truly taken by surprise to discover that they are real. Exactly, as I was saying a second ago, one thing I have said in the past, just to leave this off on here, if Matt Reeves and Robert Pattinson were willing to do another movie, so assuming Robert Pattinson's Batman doesn't die by part 3, which he better not, like I just don't like the idea of that, unless it was executed in a way that I'm just not seeing right now. But let's just say, hypothetically, the third film ends off with him still wanting to protect Gotham. It doesn't end in such a way where Bale's Batman goes off with Selina on vacation around the world, but he's still protecting Gotham. They could do a Hugh Jackman Logan thing, and where it's like, hey, if the director's still interested, if Robert Pattinson's still interested, it's a good thing. It's in this Elseworlds universe anyway. In 12 to 15 years' time, if they're both down and they pitched it to Warner Brothers, hey, do you feel like doing a final installment in that trilogy we did 12 to 15 years ago? And where it's in the same continuity, but Batman has one last adventure. And they pitch something like a hardened, seasoned Robert Pattinson Batman facing something that he's only heard tales about, the Court of Owls. Something he looked into before, but could never prove, but it turns out they are real. I think that would be so cool. If you have any ideas and like pitches of what you would like to see in a hypothetical Robert Pattinson Batman-styled Logan movie, just revisiting his character in around 12 to 15 years time, let me know those down in the comments below because I would love to read them. So up next from Small Body, Big Ears 8678, there's such potential for a comic accurate Bane in this universe, giving Bruce/Batman an equal in terms of intelligence, physicality, and strength would be such an interesting take. It could be a later movie in the series, but giving Bane the role that Deathstroke had in the solo Batfleck film, pretty much destroying Bruce's and Batman's world, would be awesome to see. Now, I do agree, one of the villains we have spoken about quite a while back now is Bane. I would love to see that, and what I mean about having spoken about him before is because obviously I get asked quite a bit about what villains I can see in Matt Reeves' Batverse, because people already know my stance and how I'm very adamant that Matt Reeves isn't going to go too comic book fantastical. So there are villains that could work with, and just to name a couple, Scarecrow, Fear, Toxin, drugs, hallucinogenics like that are very believable, and that's a way to unwind that character. I think Mr. Freeze can be done. We've actually done a whole episode in my Rogues Gallery adaptation series on that. I think even Poison Ivy can be done, but not in the fantastical way, but rather unwinding her in a way that can still be somewhat accurate to her character traits, if you will. And the same thing with Bane. Bane can be comic accurate in many ways, but now you may be wondering about Venom. So when I say comic accurate, I think you can still do the Pennyadura backstory. I don't know how much of that we would see in the movie. And that's the thing with Bane anyway. I do think that's such an important part of his character, so to skip over that would be problematic. Maybe they can somewhat reference that in the movie or do flashbacks or just something that can help evolve his character to show how much this man has been through the trials and tribulations and whatnot. But the biggest thing is Venom. Now, Venom, I do think, can be adapted just in the sense of how Matt Reeves could walk the line of what is fantastical. So what I mean by that is not going too far overboard, like, again, a flying man-bat, but hey, what's a way that we can do something that is somewhat unrealistic, but not going too far at the same time? And that would be a drug that gives you enhanced reflexes, maybe quite an edge in combat, but not necessarily blowing your muscles up, as I always say, to the size of balloons that you might see in the comics or, I don't know, the Arkham games. Now, people always like to reference the adrenaline, the epinephrine shot that Batman took at the end of the first film. I'm still getting comments till today saying epinephrine/adrenaline isn't green, and I completely agree with you, but the thing is, it's still, like, we know for a fact that it's on the actual cartridge, it says epinephrine, it's adrenaline. And it says even in the concept art book for that very shot that he has them handy just in case he needs to use it in the very instance that we saw in the movie. So all I can say to you there is that I don't think that is Venom, because we know it isn't. But at a stretch, maybe it's like a souped up version of adrenaline, epinephrine. Because you're right, like epinephrine isn't green. So maybe, you know, Bruce, when going through the Wayne R&D to form his suit, get his gadgets, build his own stuff, saw that there was something like that being developed where it is adrenaline, it functions as adrenaline, but it gives you even more of a jacked response, so to speak. So you could probably guess where I'm going with this. Bane's Venom would be something akin to how roided out we saw Batman get at the end of the film. Imagine something like that can be applied to Bane. It doesn't go so unrealistic into where it actually expands your muscle from like a few inches to like 25 inches. But it's like, damn, imagine trying to take someone on a normal human level like Batman is. Not normal, he's very good, but you know, he's got his reflexes that he has without any somewhat stimulants there. But he's up against a guy who's just coming at him completely roided out, enhanced in every neural way that the drug grants him. Something that would just be absolutely crazy to go up against if you're ever in a fight with somebody using it. But here's the other thing, Bane. Would we see Bane in the trilogy? This is something I always go round and round and round in my head about as well. Villains that have been used before in Batman movies or even TV shows, which I think has a bit less of an effect because sometimes people are like, but we've seen this villain in this show and that show and that show. And I'm like, I don't think that would really have a ripple effect into if they're going to be used in a movie or not. But what I'm trying to get to is seeing a villain in part 2 of the Batman or part 3 that was used in Nolan's, for example. It's just so hard to know. I don't think just because, for example, Scarecrow was used in Batman Begins, that means for some reason we won't have Scarecrow in the Batman Part 2 or Part 3. I don't even necessarily think because we saw Tom Hardy's Bane in The Dark Knight Rises that we won't see Bane in this trilogy. But it could have a factor. What if Reeves does look at that saying like, okay, they have been used before, and so I want to explore a character who hasn't been on the big movie screen in a long time, someone like Mr. Freeze. How can I make that work in my grounded world? That's the challenge I want to take on for part 2 or part 3. He could go that route, but clearly he's not totally against it because, you know, he introduced Barry Keoghan's Joker. Even if it's very subtly, I think it's very clear that he has more plans for him in the Arkham series, so he's not afraid to use somebody as big as the Joker again. Granted that it's no way near as highlighted right now as Heath Ledger's Joker, but still, the Joker's a character that has been used with Arthur Fleck in an Elseworlds story, Jared Leto's Joker, say what you will there, and Heath Ledger's Joker, and some other, you know, thrown around here and there. So it really is anyone's guess. When anyone comments saying, oh, we're not going to see that villain because we saw that villain in Batman Begins, I don't think that really is any kind of red tape that prohibits you from using a villain again, especially with a new director and a new vision and a new tone. I think we can all agree that any character in Matt Reeves' Batverse will not really copy and paste what we saw in previous iterations. It's a very, very distinct iteration that Matt Reeves has cooked up here. So even if he did want to use Bane again after seeing Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, I would be excited because I think it would be quite a distinct version of that character that would be worth seeing again. So in conclusion, with my little ramble about Bane here and the usage of villains, I think for now, Bane is up in the air totally, as is any villain. My intuition's telling me that Matt Reeves might want to go perhaps for villains who might not have been touched on as heavily as they have been in live action in recent years. But no villain is technically off limits. For example, we now have seen the Joker, even if subtly, but again, I think there are obvious plans to expand on that character eventually. But for example, outside of Fox's Gotham, the Riddler hadn't really been touched on in live action in the movies in a very, very long time. Maybe he's going to follow that route but it remains to be seen. I think for Matt Reeves, it's what would interest him, how he feels like it would impact the story from an emotional perspective, because he wants to follow this Batman and the viewer and the audience to see it through the lens of that character. So let's just say it was Scarecrow. I mean, if you think about it, Batman Begins wasn't yesterday, last month, 1 year ago, 2 years ago. It was a while ago. Now, that's when people would be like, but we saw Scarecrow in Titans, or we saw Scarecrow in the Arkham games. I get what you're saying, but that doesn't stop a director giving their own very, 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 very distinct stamp on a character that will make you probably think when you see it, if you're on the opposing side for now, oh damn, I didn't know I wanted this until I saw it. That's when I knew I loved it and needed it. So that's why my cop-out answer is usually, whatever villain he goes for, I kind of have the utmost faith in whatever the heck he's going to deliver to the screen. Sounds shilly, I know, I own that, but that's low-key how much faith I have in whatever villain of choice is introduced in the second movie, even if it's one we have seen before. Now, up next from JD1776, saying something I need in the next Batman, aside from all the fanboyish story ideas I have, is more Bruce and Alfred time. Something showing Bruce and Alfred are working together, or a scene like in The Phantasm, Vengeance Blackens the Soul Bruce. That's one thing I think the first movie was lacking, showing that Alfred is the only one Batman really trusts and how they interact. I think that is an absolute no-brainer, flipping requirement there. I love Andy Serkis. I've been such a big fan of his from a very young age, ever since The Lord of the Rings. So the fact that I've enjoyed his performances all throughout the years and he got cast as Alfred is just fantastic. I really liked Alfred in the first movie. And given the limited time that we got with Alfred, I do understand, given the perspective and approach to Batman and Bruce and where he was psychologically at in this movie, why Alfred's screen time was pretty much so limited compared to what I think maybe fan expectations were for the character. But with what we got from Andy Serkis' Alfred, I feel like that was really pivotal in Bruce's transformation from, vengeance at the beginning to hope. For example, the hospital scene, or even going back right to the beginning of the movie, if it wasn't for Alfred and that little somewhat, pressure of his hand on Bruce's shoulder with the various scenes that we did see him still ever so present, despite maybe not seeing him all the time, then Bruce's transformation in that first movie might not have gone down exactly the way it did. So now we're at a place with Alfred and Bruce in where their relationship has really grown to a point of where I think it's going to be an absolute gold mine of scenes in the second movie and even the third. Who knows what could happen in the second movie to elevate the third between Bruce and Alfred, but working with the second movie for now, I don't want to get expectations too high, but since Bruce has already gone through quite a decent character arc in the first movie and his relationship with Alfred has grown so much, we could see like training scenes. I think that would be really, really cool, especially since we've had references to Bruce being trained by Alfred. Even if it's just something as casual as that, that would be really cool to see. Even if it's in the montage at the beginning of the movie, or it's just like a scene halfway through, it's just, a day in the life of. But of course, I would just in general like more time there, more time in the Batcave, more consulting. And we did see that in the first movie, like Alfred was working on the cipher, Bruce came over, had his shades on, was eating grapes out of a bowl or whatever. Those scenes are great, but if we had more consistency of that with whatever problem Bruce is dealing with in the second movie, it's just something that I think would make fans so happy. I think one way to naturally evolve this as well is to have Alfred a bit more hands-on, as a bit of reconnaissance, if you will, or at least over the comms. So if Bruce is out there, and let's just say along with the suit, there's also some Batcave upgrades, possibly with technology, when Bruce is casing out a place, we could hear Alfred over the comms, just in a similar way to how you hear Jeremy Irons over the comm in the DCEU. I think that would be so cool, and just through that subtle conversation every now and again, it would just further and further expand Pattinson's, Bruce's relationship with Alfred, the fact that he's now listening to him on the job. Then again, maybe they're reserving more of that communication between that of Jim Gordon and Pattinson's Bruce Wayne, because that was a lot of what we heard when, for example, Bruce was looking over the drops operation right before the Batmobile chase scene with Penguin. He had Jim Gordon over the comms, and that's when Selina rocked up. So I can ramble about Alfred and Bruce for absolutely forever, but I guess from you guys, what I would love for you to put down in the comments below, what is it most of all that you want to see from Alfred in the second movie? It can be something just like a scene that you really want to see. It can be an idea that you felt should have been in the first movie, but now there's even more wiggle room in the second movie. Let me know anything with regards to Alfred Pennyworth that you need to see happen in the Batman Part 2. And speaking of Bruce interacting with other characters, here we have Monkish 2003 saying, I can't wait for Pattinson and the GCPD to gain more respect for each other as the trilogy progresses. Sort of how in Arkham Asylum, the prison guards call Batman Sir. I just think that's so cool. I think that is for sure coming our way. And I really love this idea, just this comment on this, because it reminds me of something that I am looking forward to. And this, I think, can even be seen subtly, maybe, with Officer Martinez, calling him a freak at the beginning of the movie. Like, all the cops are just staring at him as he goes onto the crime scene. But by the end of the movie, Batman is literally there reading one of the Riddler's journals. Sure, you have a couple of people there who are a bit touchy about Batman. He's not even wearing gloves or whatever, but you have Martinez let him onto the crime scene. He's not exactly critiquing him constantly when they uncover the Riddler's map underneath the carpet. So I already think that there's been a nice amount of progression there from Batman already being exposed to multiple cops on a couple of scenes of some crimes. And who knows if, how long that's been going back. Was he there? I mean, I assume he was on the scene of a crime or two that the Joker did before Batman put him away in Arkham Asylum. But back then, things would have been even worse. But also, another key ingredient here that could make that relationship and respect between cops and the Batman even better is that somebody needs to become commissioner soon. And this is one thing that I think so many people think is probably obvious, but I don't know why. I'm just hesitant about it. I don't know if Jim's going to go from Lieutenant James Gordon all the way to commissioner just because we don't have a commissioner because Pete Savage died in the first movie. Sure, I'm not saying he isn't, but there's just something that's making me feel like not 100% committed to the idea that Jeffrey Wright's Jim Gordon's automatically going to be commissioner. But as of when he is, or if that does happen in the second movie, or maybe he's not commissioner right away, but let's just say he's acting commissioner, or he just stands in for it, and then he eventually keeps that role. Whenever he does become commissioner, I think there will be even more of like the boss is happy with Batman. He's brought him on loads of crime scenes before. That means we are also very used to him and cool with him as well. But I do want to make an argument there with how much Jim has brought him onto crime scenes and also the events of the Batman movie. A lot of people are probably getting used to Batman more and more, and also he did help out a bunch. And look at the press as well. Maybe the fact that he saved so many people at the end of the first movie with the flooding. Some of those people that Batman saved could be brothers, sisters, wives, husbands of cops at the GCPD. So there's probably already quite a big reputation increase in Batman as per the somewhat theme and symbol at the end of the first movie. Now, in the previous episode, we spoke about the Batman suit upgrades quite a bit. So the Spade 3577 here says, armor realistically does have a shelf life. Plates can only be used for so long and break after use. Practically, it makes sense for Bruce to advance or replace something if he thinks it is faulty. I completely agree. So with regards to the bullet holes in the existing suit, of course, he can just replace that. But will he replace it with the same looking one because he potentially has spares? Or will it be something that looks new and also offers more protection? And the Spade goes on to say here, we are left with a different Bruce Wayne after the Batman who is still learning to let people in. Lucius makes sense as the next step in Bruce's journey. And that is the key part to this comment here for me. We are left with a different Bruce Wayne after the end of the Batman, one who has grown, and I don't think we're really going to see how much he's actually grown and how much the events of the first movie have impacted him, obviously until the second movie. We did see him after the transformation and after the events of what transpired in the Batman, but only for a few scenes. He said goodbye to Selina and then he rode off. We haven't really seen, other than I guess the ending monologue, which certainly certainly signified quite an evolution in his perspective and worldview. But I wonder if we're going to see, as per what the Spade is on about here, what if this new and different Bruce Wayne, one who has grown quite a bit and who is learning to let people in, like Alfred, who he's really let in, what if the next step is someone like Lucius? Now, whenever I've spoken about Lucius Fox before, I have maintained that even though Lucius is a part of Batman canon, and we have seen him before in pretty much a lot of iterations of Batman, that you don't need him. So this Batman, and the way Matt Reeves speaks about him, is that he really wanted to show that this Bruce Wayne really did make everything himself. The car looks like he made it himself. The suit literally looks like he got some police riot gear and modified it and did this, that, and the other and made it himself. Pretty much everything is very self-made, and it gives it a very unique feel for this iteration of the Batman. Now, maybe while all of that can still be maintained, the more we see Robert Pattinson's Batman in Part 2 and Part 3, perhaps the whole self-reliant, self-making things is just meant to symbolize where he's at in Batman Year 2. But as we advance, that doesn't mean that he's going to always completely be self-reliant when it comes to making things. And that is when you can get someone like Lucius Fox coming in. Now, I don't know how to feel about this, because it could be like, okay, cool, Lucius Fox could genuinely help out, and it could pave a really cool way to some new opportunities for Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne, such as upgrades, a new suit, new tech, new implementations into the Batmobile. But there is something really satisfying as well with how Bruce could continue for Part 2 and Part 3 with everything, like even the upgrades, like the cool upgrades that you would expect Lucius to bring, is still just delivered by himself. So I guess once again here, I'm going to pose it around to you. Would you like, if you had the choice and you could sign off right now, would you tick the box of bring Lucius in, or would you tick the box of, nah, we're still going to get upgrades, but it's still just going to be solely through that of Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne, and you can tick that box. But we do have another comment here from Roach4456 saying you could set up Lucius halfway through the second movie or towards the end of the second. You have him as somebody who's an ally at Wayne Enterprises, and he helps Bruce get the company on track, and then have the third movie, Bruce's biggest challenge, multiple villains, and now needs to upgrade his equipment because he has taken it as far as he can in the Batcave, and he asks Lucius for help. So yeah, maybe there is like a third option, and where we still see Bruce fairly self-reliant in the second movie, but when it culminates to the events of the third film, where Bruce, of what we can assume, is up against his biggest challenge yet, whether that is your theory or another theory where Riddler and Joker do break out, but there's all of this new challenge and unprecedented threat that he has to face, to the point of where he already knows Lucius, and he actually does go to someone else for more of a significant leap in terms of something that he can't necessarily do himself. I'm really torn in the middle. I absolutely love the way of it just going the way it has right now, with him just continuing to tinker and tinker away in the Batcave and all of the upgrades we see. And this doesn't mean he's going to be limited in upgrades just because he doesn't have Lucius Fox. I do believe that Pattinson's Bruce would still make leaps in technology and upgrades just through his own back. But I also do see the advantage of if they could find a really cool way of bringing Lucius Fox in, perhaps in the way that Roach just suggested, naturally, maybe not right away in Part 2, but more paving a way for Part 3, for like the culmination of all the movies to be Bruce's biggest challenge yet, and he gets a bit of assistance, then yeah, like I wouldn't be completely against that either. And I'm not against it anyway, it's just I really dig the fact that we haven't already got Lucius Fox and Batman is just solely a solo operation. But he does make a good point here with how Batman is letting more people in, and with more than one thing changing for Bruce throughout the events of the first movie, by the ending of the first movie, we can expect to see more than one thing change into the future as well, and possibly unforeseen to us right now about how much this change could bring with Batman growing as a character and what he'd be open to in the future. So up next is from Dr. Suis 360 saying, I really hope, and I know we speak about Joker quite a bit, but I found this comment quite interesting because I keep seeing people talk about it. I really hope Matt Reeves uses the Joker in some capacity in one of the movies as opposed to the shows. He wouldn't have introduced the Joker if they didn't have some plan to use him. And if they don't use him in the movies, he'd just be succumbing to fan pressure comments of people saying Joker fatigue and I'm sick of the Joker being in Batman movies. The Joker is a huge part of Batman lore and you can never have too much Joker in my opinion. What are your thoughts on when would be the best time to use him? So I wanted to bring this up again because, you know, you still get comments like this popping up on the videos. I see lots of you guys interact with each other. Some of you are of the opinion like Dr. Suis here saying that Joker is a part of Batman and you can never really have too much of him. Some of you are like, no, there is Joker fatigue. We have seen him too much. I don't really care about seeing this Joker. You can go the whole trilogy and any spin-off without seeing him. I disagree with that. So I am one of those people in where I don't think Joker fatigue is really a thing. It's the whole thing of also comic book fatigue. It's more just approach. Don't get me wrong, though. I don't think that means you need to toss Barry Keoghan's Joker in the second movie, right in the first act, and then the final act, and then a post-credit scene, and then in the third movie, and then in all the spin-offs. No. I'm just saying, to say that I wouldn't want him at all would be, like, really disingenuous. No, I want to see him, and I do think we can have him, but we don't need to rush to him. I think one thing people forget about is the amount of years in between these Batman productions. That is something I just think people just don't take into account when thinking of, oh, too much Joker, oh, blah, blah, you know. Really think about it. The Batman came out in March 2022. We're now about to go into 2024, in where March apparently production starts for that movie then, for it to hopefully release in October 2025. Can you imagine when the third movie's going to come out? That could be like 2027, 2028. We're in 2023 right now. It's 2024, 2025. 2026, 2027, and it could go on for longer. That is a long time to really slowly cook. You know, imagine cooking something for hours. You know, you leave it to like marinade, you leave it to simmer in the background there, and I think people would then be like, oh, okay. Like, yeah. But in the short time, people are like, oh, Joker, you know, can't have him right now. I don't really see it that way. I see the long game. I see that Matt Reeves said that there may be some other spaces in where we revisit that character. I'm butchering the quote there, but I'm abbreviating. He basically said that there's some stories in where we can come back to that character meaning Joker, in the Arkham space. Now, the Arkham show is a show in development. Obviously, the writer's strike really put a stunt in the development for that, but as far as we're aware right now, it's still going on. And given the tee-up and the tease at the ending of the first movie, Gotham Loves a Comeback Story, yes, you can have them break out of Arkham either in the Arkham series that could bridge the movie number 2 to movie number 3, and then for him to be a bigger role in the Batman Part 3. But some of you have pointed out as well something pretty relevant as well, and how if the Arkham series is being developed currently, given that the writer's strike is over and has been developed for a while, would they really wait to make it all the way in between the Batman Part 2 and Part 3? Would it not be something that comes out before Part 2? Now, that is a very, 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 very good point. So what that would mean is that not only would we be getting the Penguin series before the Batman Part 2, but we'd also be getting the Arkham series before the Batman Part 2. So what I would say there is, well, yes, technically you can be developing the Arkham series right now. It's been developed for a while, granted that it had a massive point in time and where it wasn't being developed because we had like a 4 to 5 month strike from writers. It would still need to go through casting and everything like that, and then into pre-production and then production, which wouldn't happen until I don't know, sometime mid 2024 to late 2024. So yes, you could technically say if production for the Arkham series started by August, September 2024, that after filming the episodes, they could squeeze it out before the Batman Part 2. Maybe they could even release it pretty close to the Batman Part 2, which would be a cool ramp up to it. But I don't know. Just because something's being developed quite early, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come out before Part 2. It can still be developed as an intended release between Part 2 and Part 3. But I do totally hear those people saying that, and I would love to know what you guys think. Do you think, given that the Arkham series has a showrunner who's also writing it, and it's already been developed for quite a while. Like, we don't know how much progress has been made given the points I've already made, but do you think that given that it's been worked on for quite a while, like in the grand scheme of things, that it's intended for a release before Part 2, and that is also intended to be a bridge between the first movie and the second movie, just like the Penguin series is? There's something intuitively telling me that I don't know about that. I obviously 1000% believe, because it's very obvious, that the Penguin series is a bridge, as we know it's set temporally before the events of Part 2, but the Arkham series, I guess, to be honest, it depends what role the Arkham series is meant to fulfill, because also how much of it would be about Joker. I do believe Joker would be in it, undoubtedly, but as I said, who knows what the story is really about? How many other areas of Arkham are we going to focus on? How many other characters? I've got the idea of that anthology-esque episode-to-episode thing, and where really it does become all connected and all plot points converge to maybe a breakout at the end, and how Joker was the man behind the curtains there. But that's just an idea in my head. It might not really be about that, but given what Matt Reeves said, I do have faith that Joker would be involved, because he said we do have some stories that will come back to the Arkham space. But would there really be a breakout for the events of the second movie? I don't think so. It just made more logical sense to me that whatever the repercussions and developments are in the Penguin series, and whatever Rogues Gallery character is simultaneously introduced in the second movie alongside Penguin also being a threat, being Kingpin status, that the Arkham series will facilitate maybe a larger rise for Joker in years and years to come from now for the third movie. I really don't know. As you can tell, I'm kind of tripped up on this one. I can go round and round and round in circles. Another thing we could say is that even if it did come out before Part 2, because again, the idea of that is that it has been developed for a while. We don't know how far it is, but let's just say that they did start production before Part 2, and arguably you could say that the editing process and everything like that would be done in enough time to pump it out before October 2025, that you can still have the Arkham story. You can still have Joker involved in that story, but it doesn't mean that he breaks out there and then. Maybe it tackles whatever it would tackle, and it also tackles the idea of Joker breaking out, but it ends off with even more of a bigger tease than that of the tease we got in the first movie, where he just says Gotham loves a comeback story. Maybe it ends off with the plan is ready to ignite. It's not happening right now. It instead ends off on that the audience is aware of the plan. We know it's going to go down in the future, and then I don't know, the series ends, the Penguin series would have already aired by then. This is when we would have the events of the second movie take place, which aren't necessarily linked to that of what happened in the Arkham series, but maybe at the end, akin to the Riddler and Joker scene, it revisits what happened and what transpired in the Arkham series, in where maybe they are going to break out for Part 3. So my main point there is whatever does get facilitated in the storyline of the Arkham show doesn't necessarily mean that the big explosion happens at the end of that series. It could just mean that they're ready to pull the lever, but then we have the Batman Part 2, and then we revisit the storyline from the Arkham show, and then the lever gets pulled. But this is when I know some people are going to say, if there's such connected storytelling between a show and a movie, wouldn't that confuse people who haven't watched the Arkham show if they kind of, continue a scene or a story beat at the end of Part 2 that revisits what happened in the Arkham series that released before the Batman Part 2? I would just give you a similar answer into where, just like the Penguin series, if you skip over it, I can't imagine it's going to make a massive difference. You still pick up with the Batman Part 2, just knowing Oz Cobblepot from the first movie, knowing that he aspired for power. That was very obvious. And he's now the new Kingpin in Falcone's position. That's not something that is mega confusing to pick up on, especially when there's going to be an opening monologue that I bet your ass will somewhat acknowledge that. Now, as for the Arkham show, I think given the tease of Barry Keoghan's Joker in the first movie, teasing Gotham loves a comeback story, whatever scene could pick up at the end of Part 2, continuing off from the Arkham show, would be intuitive enough to the audience in where they would just understand that shit's been going on behind the scenes, and criminals in Arkham Asylum, surprise, surprise, have been working to get out of there. So it would be beneficial if you want to see extra context for all the steps they took to get to the place of breaking out. But if you just picked up there and then with a scene like that and you haven't got that context behind it, it's still self-explanatory enough to know that, oh, they're doing this now and this could be teeing up another thing in the future, just like that scene between the Riddler and Joker did at the end of the Batman Part 1. I know I probably got a bit convoluted there, but that really does all just depend on if you have the perspective of if the Arkham show is going to be filmed and released before Part 2, or if you're more in the thinking of just because it's being developed right now doesn't mean that they're going to film it and release it before Part 2. It's still perhaps a planned show to release between that of Part 2 and Part 3, which, believe it or not, is my preference. I would love all of the Batman content that I could get as soon as I could get it, but at least the way my brain is exploring it right now, it does make more sense to be like, hey, there's the Penguin, Bridges Part 1 and Part 2. And then between Part 2, hey, there's the Arkham show, telling all kinds of creepy, haunted House of Arkham stories that it can, but also continuing that moment from Riddler and Joker talking about Gotham loving a comeback story, bridging the gap between Part 2 and Part 3. But let me know if you are one of those of whom believe that because it found its showrunner and writer and that it was being developed, that you think that it could be squeezed out before the Batman Part 2 releases in October 2025. Now, next up from Bloody Vampire 6968, they say, I would like to have the inner monologue / narration from Batman throughout the movie, besides that of the beginning and the end. Though I do understand why others won't like that. I'm not gonna lie, I think I would dig that as well. I think if I maybe cast my mind back to before the movie, when we knew that there would be a monologue because we saw Bruce's journal and we were speculating how there would be a monologue, I think with the journal, way back in the speculation days before the Batman released, a lot of us were saying maybe it was consistent throughout the movie. Not too in your face, it's just that maybe every 30 or 45 minutes there might be a new paragraph being read out. So like when Bruce was searching the drawers in the movie, maybe amongst that montage of scenes, there's another voiceover of him having written in the journal, just to get more into Bruce's psychology. Sure, the movie does that in so many ways, and it already did it with that intro and outro monologue, and maybe it does just through having the intro and outro make it more effective to hear his monologue just through two of them, but to maybe have a peep or two more of them in the movie in pressing times, like maybe when Alfred was in hospital, could have been effective as well, but maybe, just maybe two on the nose. Maybe we don't always need to hear that in Bruce's head. The intro's fine to kind of touch base, the outro to symbolize the development or the outcome of the movie and Batman's perspective on that, but maybe if you had it littered, even not too much throughout the movie, but just one or two more times, it could come down to more of a situation of show, don't tell us all the time. And that's the way Matt Reeves opted to go for. He showed us the suffering of Bruce while Alfred was in hospital, the frustration of when he was, combing through all the files, spray painting on the floor, brainstorming the Riddler case. If we had a commentary during that, maybe it would have been cool in one way, but just a bit too on the nose in other ways. Let me know what way you would opt for. But everyone, I think I'm going to end this ramble there today, so let me know your thoughts on everything that we discussed. As you guys know, I do read every single one of your comments, so I can't wait to see what you have to say. I would really appreciate a like on this video, especially if you got this far. Consider subscribing for more Batman content, including news when we get the news, that is, which might not be like too far away in the grand scheme of things, considering the writer's strike is now over, the actors' strike is ongoing, but they're negotiating with the AMPTP as we speak. So once that's out the way, in the next 2 to 3 months, we could hear some kind of update significantly with a bunch of projects out there, including the Batverse. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you, Bat family, in the next video. Goodbye.